Why is it that discipline slips away so easily, even for people who want it more than anything? You wake up with the best of intentions. You tell yourself today will be different, but by nightfall the pattern has repeated. Another day wasted. Another promise broken. Another heavy reminder that no matter how badly you want consistency, something keeps pulling it out of your hands. Here's the shift you need to see immediately. What you'll realize isn't just which habits destroy you, but how simple shifts can flip them into the very foundation of your discipline. Once you expose the patterns that weaken you and learn how to reverse them, you'll understand it has always been within your reach. It was only buried under routines that don't belong in the life you want to build. This is the truth most people never face. Discipline doesn't collapse in one dramatic event. Focus isn't stolen by a single failure. It erodes quietly, in silence, through the small daily habits that feel harmless in the moment but lethal over time. These are the choices that shape you without permission. The way you start your morning without clarity, the way you fill your mind instead of wisdom, the way you end the day without reflecting on what was learned. Each one by itself seems insignificant, but together they create the invisible system that keeps you stuck exactly where you are. Think back on your own days. How often have you started in chaos, letting notifications decide your focus before you've even taken a deep breath? How many times have you reached for distraction instead of direction? How many nights have ended with exhaustion, but no growth, no reflection, no refinement? When you live like this long enough, discipline feels like a myth, as if only the lucky or the gifted can sustain it. But that's a lie. What really determines the strength of your discipline is not your talent, not your motivation, but the quiet routines you practice every single day. That is why so many feel trapped. They are not broken. They are simply following patterns that guarantee weakness. And unless those patterns are exposed and replaced, no amount of motivation will hold. You'll always start strong and end defeated, because you've built your life on habits that contradict the discipline you claim to want. But the good news is this: if small habits can destroy you, small habits can also rebuild you. And that rebuilding begins the moment you recognize what has been draining you in silence. Because once you see it, you can no longer unsee it, and the power to choose differently becomes yours again. So let's begin. The first daily habit destroying your discipline and focus is starting your day in chaos. Discipline is not destroyed at the end of the day when you give up. It is destroyed in the first hour when you surrender to chaos. The way you begin determines everything that follows, and yet most people treat their moments. The alarm rings, the phone buzzes, and before they have even remembered who they want to be, they are already reacting to the demands of the world. The day has stolen their focus before they have even opened their eyes fully. You can tell yourself you are disciplined. You can promise that you will make better choices later, but once your first hour is filled with noise, your entire system of discipline collapses like a house built on sand. The truth is simple: your mornings are not neutral. They are either preparing you for leadership over your own life, or they are placing you under the control of everything external. When the first act of your day is to check your phone, scroll through distractions, or rush without intention, you send a message to yourself that you are not in charge. You have handed over the steering wheel before the journey has even begun, and the rest of the day follows that tone. You become reactive instead of proactive, scattered instead of focused, and no matter how hard you try later, it always feels like you are behind. That feeling of being behind is one of the greatest killers of consistency, because the mind loses belief when it senses it is always chasing, never leading. Imagine two people waking up side by side. One opens their eyes, immediately grabs the phone, and spends the first 20 minutes absorbing the chaos of news, emails, and social media. By the time they put the phone down, their mind is already fragmented, full of other people's priorities, worries, and agendas. They get out of bed rushed, anxious, slightly irritated, and uncertain where to direct their energy. The other person wakes up, sits in silence for a moment, and looks at a simple list they prepared the night before. The 3 most important things they must accomplish today. They breathe, they focus, they begin not with reaction, but with intention. One person has given away the day before it started, the other has already taken command. Multiply this small difference over weeks and months, and you can see why one moves forward with steady progress while the other lives in the illusion of busyness without growth. When you start your day in chaos, you invite stress to become the dominant energy. Cortisol floods your body. Your mind narrows into survival mode. and every challenge feels larger than it is. Small tasks become overwhelming. Conversations feel heavier, and your tolerance for discomfort disappears. In this state, discipline becomes almost impossible because discipline requires calm focus, not frantic reaction. People often ask, why do I always lose control halfway through the day? The answer is, you already lost it in the first hour. Without structure at the beginning, the rest of the day is built on instability. So what does it look like to reclaim the morning? The shift is not complicated, but it is powerful. Before the day begins, the day must already be finished on paper. This means that the night before, you choose your direction. You write down the 3 actions that matter most, not 30, not a long list of impossible ambitions, but 3. When you wake up, you don't ask, what should I do? You already know. You are not left vulnerable to distraction because your mind has instructions and your emotions have a path. This is not about scheduling or punishing routines. It is about clarity. When you wake up with clarity to negotiate with yourself, you simply execute what you have already chosen. There is another dimension here that few people realize. Planning your day is not just about controlling your time. It is about controlling your emotions. Chaos breeds stress, but preparation breeds calm. When you wake with intention, the noise of the world no longer feels urgent. You are not pulled in every direction because you already know which direction is yours. This calm is noticed by others. People respect the person who walks into the day already composed, already focused. They sense the difference, because most are still drowning in the confusion of their own unplanned hours. This presence becomes one of the most underestimated advantages of discipline. You don't just control your results, you influence the environment around you. Now, let's be clear. This is not about perfection. Even the most disciplined will face unpredictable mornings. But the question is, what is the default? If your default is chaos, you will always struggle to recover. If your default is order, interruptions may shake you, but they cannot. The foundation is too strong. The real danger is not one chaotic morning, but a lifestyle of chaotic morning. Because when you repeat them enough, they stop feeling like chaos and start feeling normal. And once chaos feels normal, discipline has no chance of survival. So tonight, before you collapse into sleep, take 10 minutes. Ask yourself, what 3 actions matter most tomorrow? Write them down on paper, not on a screen where distractions live, but on something physical and undeniable. When you wake, read them before you do anything else. Let them become your anchor. This single habit of preparation will change the energy of your mornings. And when the morning changes, the day changes. And when enough days change, your life begins to change. Remember this principle. Whoever controls the morning controls the day. And whoever controls the day, slowly but surely, controls the future. Discipline is not about waiting for motivation. It is about removing the silent habits that rob you before you even begin. Starting your day in chaos is one of those habits. End it now, and you reclaim not just your focus, but your authority over yourself. If your morning sets the tone for the body, feed your mind sets the tone for the soul. And yet, most people consume information the way children eat candy. Endlessly, thoughtlessly, and without concern for the damage it causes. Every notification, every scroll, every fragment of gossip or sensational headline is taken in as if the mind were an open trash bin. But the mind is not neutral. Everything that enters shapes perception, and perception shapes reality. When you feed your mind junk, you will live a junk life, no matter how much discipline you try to impose later. Consider how the brain works. It is a filter, constantly interpreting, deciding, labeling the world around you. What it filters in the morning becomes the lens for the rest of the day. Fill it with fear, comparison, outrage, and distraction, and you will carry those emotions into every decision you make. A conversation with your colleague becomes charged with irritation you absorbed from a headline. A task that should be simple feels heavy because your attention has been fractured by 10 minutes of scrolling through meaningless content. You cannot expect discipline when your very instrument of discipline, your mind, has been poisoned before it was even put to work. Most people defend this habit by calling it staying informed or keeping up. But look closely at the fruit it produces. Does scrolling through feeds leave you empowered or drained? Does gossip make you wiser or smaller? Does the endless stream of news give you clarity or anxiety? What you repeatedly expose yourself to becomes your internal climate. If the climate is polluted, Don't be surprised when you struggle to breathe freely, think clearly, or act with focus. Discipline does not thrive in a polluted environment. It suffocates. The tragedy is that people believe they have no time to invest in wisdom, yet they have unlimited time for noise. Hours disappear into shows, feeds, videos, podcasts that entertain but never elevate. And then they say, "I can't stay focused," as if focus is a mystery rather than the direct consequence of what you allow into your mind. The law is unavoidable. Whatever you plant will grow. If you plant weeds, you cannot expect a harvest of fruit. The mind is a garden, and every piece of content you consume is a seed. This is not philosophy, it is psychology. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. Feed the brain with junk, and those patterns become automatic. Feed it with wisdom, and you train yourself to think, decide, and act at a higher level. This is why some people rise while others stagnate. It is not that one group is smarter. It is that one has chosen to curate their inputs. One spends 10 minutes each morning in a book that challenges their thinking, while the other spends 10 minutes in a feed that depletes their spirit. Multiply that difference by weeks, months, years, and the gap is unbridgeable. The one who feeds on wisdom makes decisions from clarity. The one who feeds on junk makes decisions from confusion. And in life, your direction is only as strong as your decisions. So how do you break the cycle? The solution is not complicated. Begin with one simple rule. Never let junk be the first or last thing you consume in your day. Guard the entrance and the exit. In the morning, before opening a single notification, give your mind something nourishing. 10 pages of a book that expands you. 5 minutes of reflection. A recording that teaches instead of distracts. At night, before you close your eyes, choose words that direct your subconscious, not ones that pollute it. This discipline creates a frame. Within that frame, your mind grows cleaner, sharper, more resilient. Start small. 10 pages a day might sound insignificant, but over the course of a year, that is the equivalent of 10 to 15 books. 15 books filled with ideas that elevate your standards, challenge your assumptions, and expand your capacity. Contrast that with 1,500 hours of scrolling. One produces compound growth, the other produces compound decay. Discipline requires compound growth. Do not underestimate the emotional shift this habit creates. When you begin your day with wisdom, the tone of your inner dialogue changes. Instead of repeating the anxieties and comparisons of the digital crowd, you find yourself repeating truths that strengthen you. When life presses against you, you have reserves to draw from. This is the unseen benefit of feeding your mind wisely. It creates an anchor. When storms come, and they always do, you are not swept away because your mind has been built on rock, not sand. Ask yourself now, what is the first voice you allow into your day? Is it the curated chaos of the world, or is it the quiet discipline of growth? Every time you reach for your phone instead of your purpose, you are making a declaration. My focus belongs to others. Every time you open a book, listen to wisdom, or reflect intentionally, you make a different declaration. My focus belongs to me. One of these choices will destroy your discipline, the other will rebuild it. So the challenge is clear. Starting today, choose one piece of wisdom to feed your mind before you expose yourself to anything else. Guard that practice as you would guard your health, because your mind is the engine of your discipline, and what fuels it determines how far you can go. Discipline is not just a battle of the will, it's a battle of the inputs. And if you continue to feed your mind junk, you will never win. But if you choose to feed it wisdom, even in small daily doses, you will build a foundation strong enough to sustain discipline not for a week, not for a month, but for a lifetime. Discipline is not only a matter of the mind, it is also a matter of the body. You cannot expect to live with sharp focus and consistent discipline when the very instrument carrying your will is neglected. Yet this is one of the most common blind spots for people who claim they want success. They speak about goals, ambition, financial freedom, or spiritual growth, but all of it rests on a foundation that is breaking beneath them: their health. The body is the vessel of every dream you have, and when you weaken it, you weaken everything else with it. Think of how much energy it takes to stay disciplined, to wake early, to focus on deep work, to resist temptation, to keep your promises when it's easier to break them. All of this demands strength. And strength is not born in the moment of decision. It is prepared in advance by how you treat your body. A tired body makes tired choices. A body filled with processed food and no movement cannot carry a disciplined mind for long. This is why so many people begin strong in the morning and collapse by the afternoon. It is not that they lack willpower, but that their body has no energy reserves left to sustain it. Consider how often people neglect the basics. Sleep becomes negotiable, sacrificed to one more episode, one more hour of scrolling, one more late-night distraction. Food becomes about convenience, not nourishment, a quick burst of sugar or caffeine to get through the next task. Movement is treated as optional, squeezed out of the schedule because there's no time. And little by little, the body becomes sluggish, heavy, and uncooperative. They wonder why they lack focus, why discipline feels impossible, why motivation never lasts. But the answer is simple. The body has been abandoned, and when the body is abandoned, discipline soon follows. Now imagine the opposite. A person who treats their body as a performance machine, not a storage unit. They rest deliberately, understanding that sleep is not wasted time, but the repair of the very system they depend on. They eat with intention, fueling themselves with what gives energy rather than what only satisfies cravings. They move daily, not out of vanity or guilt, but to keep energy circulating, to keep the mind sharp and emotions balanced. This person is not superhuman. They simply respect the link between the body and the discipline they desire. And because of that, their willpower lasts longer, their focus remains clearer, and their spirit feels lighter. The tragedy is that most people wait until crisis forces them to care. They neglect their health until a diagnosis arrives, until exhaustion becomes unbearable, until their body refuses to cooperate. But by then, years of neglect have already stolen opportunities, broken promises, and wasted time. What they never realized is that every skipped workout, every careless meal, every sacrificed hour of rest was not just damaging the body, it was damaging discipline itself. Because without energy, discipline collapses. You cannot build consistency on fatigue. So how do you change this habit? Again, the answer is not complicated. Start small, but make it non-negotiable. 20 minutes of movement each day is enough to awaken your body and train your mind in consistency. It could be a walk, stretching, bodyweight exercises, a run, anything. The key is to move with intention, not just when it's convenient. With food, the shift is about awareness. Ask before you eat, is this fuel or is this a distraction? If it weakens you, if it leaves you sluggish, it is not fuel. And with sleep, treat it as seriously as any meeting or responsibility. Block the hours you need, protect them, and you will discover that rest is not a luxury, but the foundation of clarity. One of Stephen Covey's most powerful principles was sharpen the saw. You cannot cut with a dull blade, no matter how much effort you use. In the same way, you cannot live with discipline when the body is dull, tired, and neglected. Sharpening the saw means investing time in renewal, physically, mentally, spiritually. And neglecting the body is the fastest way to live in constant dullness, forcing discipline to fail again and again. The body is not separate from the mind. Modern science confirms this. Your nutrition affects your mood, your sleep affects your decision-making, your physical activity affects your cognitive performance. What feels like a discipline problem is often a physical problem in disguise. Fix the body, and suddenly the mind feels stronger, clearer, more resilient. Ignore the body, and no amount of motivational speeches will save you. Ask yourself now, what is the true cost of neglecting your body? How many opportunities have you lost because you were too tired to act, too foggy to think, too drained to persist? How many moments of focus slipped away because your energy was spent on simply staying awake? How many promises to yourself collapsed because your body didn't have the strength to carry them? If you keep living this way, the cost will not only be your goals, it will be your future. But the choice is still in your hands. Discipline begins with energy, and energy begins with respect for the body. Tonight, go to bed earlier. Tomorrow, move your body for 20 minutes. Choose one meal that fuels instead of drains. These are not small acts of health. They are acts of discipline, repeated until they become identity. Because when you treat your body with discipline, you create the physical foundation for every other discipline to grow. Never forget, the body is the only place you have to live. Neglect it, and discipline will remain out of reach. Honor it, and you will discover strength you didn't know you had, clarity that carries you forward, and resilience that turns discipline into a way of life. Discipline dies when direction is forgotten. You cannot be consistent in what you no longer see clearly. Yet this is exactly where most people live. They drift from task to task, busy but not purposeful, active but not advancing. They set goals once in a while, maybe at the beginning of a year, maybe after a seminar or a burst of inspiration, and then they forget them. Written once, buried in a drawer, left behind like old promises. And when those goals disappear from sight, discipline has nothing to anchor itself to. Because discipline is not just about self-control, it is about alignment with something greater. Without a goal in front of you, your effort scatters into noise. Think about it. Every morning you wake up, you are pulled in 100 directions. Notifications, responsibilities, the unexpected demands of others. If your goals are not present, these distractions become the default. Your day is shaped not by what you intend, but by what screams the loudest. And over time, you confuse activity with progress. You feel exhausted, but you are not fulfilled. You feel busy, but you are not advancing. You call it discipline to push through, but pushing through without direction is nothing more than survival. Real discipline is focus, and focus requires a target. Most people don't fail because they don't have goals. They fail because they forget them. And a forgotten goal is soon replaced by the urgent, by the opinions of others, by the small fires of daily life. Imagine a commander leading soldiers into battle without reminding them of the mission. Confusion would take over, morale would collapse, and effort would scatter. That is exactly what happens to individuals who never review their goals. They wake up each day like soldiers without orders, fighting everything in sight, but winning nothing of value. Now compare this to the person who revisits their goals every single morning. They don't just have goals. They carry them. They see them. They feel them daily. Before the noise of the world enters, they remind themselves, this is who I am. This is where I am going. This is why it matters. That daily reminder sharpens the mind like a blade. Decisions become simpler, distractions become weaker, and discipline feels less like a battle and more like a natural response. Because when the goal is in front of you, you don't have to keep asking yourself, what should I do? You already know. The brain is wired for repetition. Whatever it sees repeatedly, it believes. This is why reviewing your goals is not just motivational, it is neurological. When you read them aloud, when you visualize them, when you write them again and again, you are programming your subconscious to see them as reality. And the subconscious is powerful. It drives behavior without asking for permission. Forgetting your goals is like removing the compass from a journey. You might still move, but you'll wander endlessly. Reviewing them daily is like resetting the compass, reminding yourself where north is, no matter how many storms come. Stephen Covey often emphasized the difference between being efficient and being effective. Efficiency is doing things well. Effectiveness is doing the right things. You can be efficient all day, answering emails, crossing off minor tasks, filling your hours with activity. But if you are not aligned with your goals, you are not effective. You are moving, but not moving forward. This is why daily review matters. It forces you to confront the gap between what you claim is important and what you are actually doing. It recenters you on what matters most, before you lose yourself in what matters least. So how do you practice this? Start with simplicity. Choose your top 3 goals, not 30, not everything at once. 3 goals that matter deeply, that if achieved, would alter the direction of your life. Write them clearly. Place them where you can see them every morning, by your bed, on your desk, inside your journal. And when you wake, review them. Read them aloud. Visualize them. Let yourself feel them. This is not about empty affirmation. It is about aligning your mind, your emotions, and your actions with what you want most. Then, throughout the day, measure your choices against those goals. Does this action serve them or distract from them? That single question can redirect your discipline more powerfully than any motivational speech. People underestimate the power of daily exposure. A goal written once is just a wish. A goal reviewed daily becomes identity. It shapes the way you think, the way you speak, the way you spend your time. It gives you a reason to say no to distractions and yes to discipline. And over time, it transforms from something you are chasing into something you are embodying. You no longer try to be disciplined. You live disciplined because you are aligned. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you looked at your goals? Not thought about them vaguely, not remembered them in passing, but looked at them, held them, spoke them aloud? If you can't remember, then you already know why focus has been slipping, why discipline feels fragile, why progress is so slow. Goals are magnets, but only if you keep them in sight. Out of sight, out of mind. Out of mind, out of life. So the challenge is simple. Tonight, write down your 3 most important goals. Tomorrow, look at them before the day begins. Repeat this daily, until it feels as natural as brushing your teeth. And watch how your discipline strengthens. Because discipline is not about forcing yourself to act against your will. It is about aligning your will with your vision. Forgetting your goals destroys that alignment. Remembering them daily restores it. Discipline without goals is just endurance. Discipline with goals is transformation. And that transformation begins the moment you stop letting your future be buried under forgetfulness. Don't let your goals live in a drawer. Bring them into your eyes, your ears, your spirit every single day. Because the person who remembers their goals daily becomes unstoppable, while the person who forgets them is doomed to drift. If forgetting your goals robs you of direction, complaining robs you of the strength to move toward them. Few habits are as destructive to discipline as the daily practice of focusing on what is wrong, what is missing, and what is unfair. Complaining may feel harmless, a release of frustration, a way to connect with others, a small venting of pressure, but it is poison disguised as relief. Every complaint reinforces a mindset of powerlessness. Every negative word you repeat to yourself or others convinces your mind that the world is against you, that effort is pointless, that discipline is a burden instead of a gift. And once that belief takes root, it is almost impossible to act with consistency. Complaining shifts your attention away from solutions and locks it on problems. Instead of seeing what can be done, you see only what is wrong. Instead of directing your energy to progress, you waste it rehearsing grievances. Over time, this becomes a loop. The more you complain, the weaker you feel. The weaker you feel, the more you complain. And because the mind follows focus, the cycle deepens until discipline collapses. You cannot build a life of strength on the foundation of constant negativity. Most people don't even realize how much they complain. It becomes a habit so natural that it passes unnoticed. They complain about the weather, the traffic, their bosses, their coworkers, their families, even about themselves. Each complaint feels small, but together they form a culture of disempowerment inside the mind. The irony is that many of these same people say they want discipline, clarity, and growth. But discipline requires energy, and energy cannot survive in an atmosphere polluted by constant negativity. Gratitude fuels, complaining drains. Imagine 2 people facing the same obstacle. One says, "This always happens to me. Nothing ever works. Why is everything so hard?" The other says, "This is difficult, but I can learn from it. I've faced challenges before and grown stronger." Both are speaking about the same reality, but the direction of their words determines the direction of their discipline. The complainer feels weaker with each sentence, more convinced of defeat, less willing to persist. The grateful person, even in difficulty, feels lighter, clearer, more capable of taking the next step. The difference isn't the challenge. It's the lens through which the challenge is seen. Gratitude is not a feeling you wait for. It is a practice you choose. Most people think gratitude is a passive emotion, something you feel once life gives you something worth celebrating. But gratitude as a discipline is much more powerful. It is the intentional focus on what is present, what is good, what is possible, especially when circumstances don't automatically invite it. Complaining is natural. Gratitude is intentional. And because discipline thrives on intentionality, gratitude strengthens discipline while complaining destroys it. When you complain, you train your brain to look for problems. The reticular activating system in your mind filters the millions of inputs you receive daily and shows you what it thinks is important. If you constantly complain, you're programming it to filter for negativity. You will begin to notice only the obstacles, only the setbacks, only the flaws in yourself and others. But when you practice gratitude, you reverse the programming. You train your brain to filter for opportunities, blessings, progress. The facts may be the same, but your perception changes, and perception drives action. Stephen Covey often emphasized that between stimulus and response, there is a space. Complaining fills that space with bitterness. Gratitude fills it with perspective. When you fill it with bitterness, you react. When you fill it with perspective, you respond. And the difference between reacting and responding is the difference between a life of chaos and a life of discipline. So how do you shift from complaining to gratitude? Begin with awareness. Notice your words for a single day. How many times do you speak about what is wrong instead of what is right? How many times do you describe yourself as unlucky, tired, overwhelmed, instead of resourceful, capable, grateful? Awareness itself is uncomfortable because it forces you to see how often you reinforce weakness with your own tongue. But discomfort is the beginning of change. Next, create a simple practice. Each morning, write down 3 things you are grateful for. Not vague cliches, but specific, concrete things. A warm bed, a friend who supports you, the chance to try again today. 3 things that remind you that life is not only problems, it is also possibilities. And don't just write them, feel them. Let them shift your state before the world enters with its noise. Over time, this practice rewires the brain. Complaints lose their grip because gratitude has become your default lens. Gratitude doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means refusing to let problems define your identity. You can acknowledge what is hard while still recognizing what is good. You can face difficulties without surrendering your focus to bitterness. This balance is the essence of mature discipline. The ability to see clearly what must be improved while still being fueled by what is already present. Complaining sees only lack. Gratitude sees both reality and potential. Ask yourself honestly, how much of your energy has been wasted rehearsing negativity? How many days have been lost not because of circumstances, but because of the story you told yourself about them? How many times have you quit on discipline because you convinced yourself it was unfair, too hard, not worth it? Complaining didn't just express your frustration, it created it. And until you stop feeding that cycle, discipline will always feel like a fight you cannot win. The challenge is simple, but it is not easy. Starting today, catch one complaint and replace it with one expression of gratitude. Instead of saying, "I'm so tired," say, "I'm grateful I have another chance to work on what matters." Instead of saying, "Nothing ever works for me," say, "I'm grateful for the lessons hidden in this failure." Do this daily, and you will notice that your energy changes, your focus sharpens, and your discipline strengthens. Complaining instead of gratitude is one of the silent habits destroying your discipline and focus. Replace it with gratitude, and you don't just change your emotions, you change the atmosphere in which your discipline lives. Because no one can remain consistent in bitterness, but anyone can grow consistent when fueled by gratitude. Of all the silent habits that destroy discipline, perhaps none is as underestimated as the way you speak to yourself. You can have goals written on the wall, a morning routine carefully planned, even a clear sense of purpose, but if your own words are working against you, discipline will eventually collapse. What you say to yourself is not just commentary, it is command. Each phrase is a seed planted in your subconscious, and your life grows in the direction of those seeds. Speak weakness long enough, and weakness becomes identity. Speak limitation daily, and limitation becomes reality. Most people think of self-talk as background noise, harmless and private. They don't realize that every complaint they make about themselves, every phrase of defeat they repeat, is programming their brain. "I can't focus. I'm always tired. I'll never change." These aren't harmless statements. They are agreements you make with failure. Each time you speak them, you reinforce the belief that you are powerless. And belief shapes behavior more than intention ever will. You might intend to be disciplined, but if your words declare otherwise, discipline will always slip away. Consider the subtle ways this plays out. You sit down to work on a project, but before you even begin, you mutter, "I'm terrible at this." Instantly, your mind takes that as instruction, lowering your effort, expecting failure. Or you face a challenge at the gym and say, "I don't have the energy." Your body obeys, draining the very strength you might have called upon. Words create atmosphere. Speak negativity, and the atmosphere becomes heavy, resistant, discouraging. Speak possibility, and the atmosphere becomes lighter, open, energized. Discipline thrives in a supportive atmosphere and dies in a hostile one. And you create that atmosphere with your words. Stephen Covey taught that we live out of our paradigms, the mental maps we carry of ourselves and the world. Language is one of the strongest forces shaping those paradigms. The words you use are not just descriptions, they are definitions. When you say, "I'm always late," you are not reporting on your past, you are writing your future. When you say, "I can't stay consistent," you are not just admitting weakness, you are giving it permission to grow. Words can either reinforce the wrong paradigm or open the door to a new one. It is not about fake positivity or empty affirmations. Pretending that everything is perfect when it isn't will not build discipline. What matters is speaking with intention. There is a difference between lying to yourself and leading yourself. Lying says, "I am already great," when the evidence is weak. Leading says, "I am becoming stronger," even in the middle of struggle. One denies reality, the other shapes it. Discipline requires this kind of honest but forward-directed language because it fuels persistence. When you declare, "I am choosing to grow through this challenge," your mind begins looking for ways to make it true. Look at the most disciplined people in any field: athletes, leaders, creators. They are careful with their words. They don't allow careless self-talk to erode their effort. They speak about their goals as if they are possible, about their struggles as if they are temporary, about themselves as if they are capable. And because they do, they build inner environments where discipline can take root and flourish. Contrast this with the average person who casually tears themselves down every day. The difference in words becomes the difference in lives. The science supports this. Neuroscience shows that repeated language forms neural pathways. The more often you say something, the stronger the pathway becomes. Over time, it becomes automatic, your default response. This is why so many people feel trapped. Their own words have built a prison of thought they don't even recognize. But the same principle can free you. Change the language, repeat it with consistency, and the pathways shift. Slowly, the inner dialogue that once sabotaged you becomes the dialogue that strengthens you. So how do you begin? First, awareness. Spend a day listening to yourself. Notice the words you speak about your abilities, your habits, your future. You may be shocked at how often you undermine yourself with casual negativity. Next, interception. The moment you catch yourself saying something like, "I can't," pause and redirect. Replace it with, "I choose to learn," or "I am building consistency." This is not about pretending difficulty doesn't exist. It is about refusing to let difficulty define you. Over time, interception becomes habit, and your self-talk begins to change naturally. Practical steps help here. Write 3 phrases that affirm the discipline you want to build. For example, "I keep my promises to myself." "I focus on what matters." "I am becoming more consistent every day." Repeat them in the morning before the noise of the world begins. Write them where you will see them often, on your desk, your mirror, your phone's background. Speak them aloud, because the act of hearing your own voice reinforces belief more deeply than silent thought. It may feel awkward at first, but repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity builds conviction. Ask yourself, what have my words been building? Have they been building excuses or endurance? Have they been building fear or confidence? Have they been building weakness or strength? The answer is already visible in your results. If your discipline is weak, your words have probably been working against you. If you want stronger discipline, your words must start working for you. Remember this principle. Your voice is always the first to hear your words. Long before the world responds to them, your own mind does. So speak carefully. Speak intentionally, because every sentence you allow is either a step toward discipline or a step away from it. Speaking against yourself is one of the most silent but devastating habits destroying your discipline and focus. Replace it with words of leadership, identity, and direction, and you will find that consistency becomes less of a fight and more of a natural expression of who you are becoming. Because in the end, you don't just live by what you think, you live by what you speak. Discipline is not only tested in how you begin the day, but also in how you end it. Many people collapse into their nights with exhaustion, switching off their minds with television, endless scrolling, or empty distraction. They mistake shutting down for resting. But rest without reflection is not renewal, it is avoidance. And avoidance is the silent thief of growth. When you end the day without pausing to reflect, you carry the same mistakes into tomorrow. You repeat the same patterns, stumble over the same distractions, and remain trapped in cycles that discipline was meant to break. Reflection is the habit that turns experience into wisdom. Without it, life becomes a blur of repeated events with no progress. You can live 10 years without reflection and end up reliving the same year 10 times. But with reflection, each day becomes a teacher. Every success is reinforced, every failure is transformed into instruction, and every challenge becomes a stepping stone. Ending the day without reflection is like leaving class without learning the lesson. The time was spent, the effort was given, but the knowledge was wasted. Why do people avoid reflection? Because it requires honesty. To sit down at the end of the day and ask, where did I fall short? Where did I succeed? What will I change tomorrow? Is uncomfortable. It exposes the gap between intention and action, between who you want to be and who you chose to be. And yet, it is in that gap that discipline is built. Without facing the gap, you cannot close it. Without awareness, there can be no adjustment. Discipline collapses not from lack of effort, but from the refusal to learn. Stephen Covey often described the principle of sharpening the saw, the discipline of renewal. Reflection is sharpening for the mind and spirit. Just as a blade becomes dull with constant use, your decisions, your focus, and your energy become dull without deliberate renewal. Reflection allows you to regain sharpness, to see clearly again, to reset before the next day begins. Neglecting it means living with a dull mind, forcing discipline to work harder and harder until it eventually breaks. Think about the atmosphere of an unreflected life. You rush through the day, reacting, fighting, surviving. At night, you collapse into distraction, never examining what the day meant. The next morning, you wake up with no lessons carried forward, no adjustments made, and no clarity gained. Each day becomes a repeat of the last. And repetition without learning is stagnation. No wonder discipline feels impossible. You are not moving forward, only spinning in place. Now imagine a different picture. At the end of each day, you take 10 minutes of silence. No screens, no noise, no performance. You sit with yourself and ask 3 simple questions. What did I do well today? What could I have done better? What will I change tomorrow? These questions are not heavy philosophy. They are practical, direct, and transformative. They force you to acknowledge progress, to admit shortcomings, and to design improvement. In 10 minutes, the day becomes your teacher, and tomorrow becomes a chance for growth instead of repetition. Reflection also has a deeper impact on discipline. It builds identity. When you reflect daily, you see patterns. You begin to notice not only what you do, but who you are becoming. And identity is the ultimate driver of discipline. If you see yourself as someone careless, distracted, reactive, then discipline will always be fragile. But when reflection shows you that you are someone who learns, someone who adapts, someone who grows, then discipline becomes natural. You no longer force yourself to be disciplined. You see yourself as disciplined. And people always act in line with who they believe they are. There is also an emotional release in reflection. Without it, you carry unresolved frustration into sleep. Your mind replays mistakes, arguments, and failures, embedding them deeper into your subconscious. But when you reflect, you name them, you learn from them, and you release them. Sleep becomes renewal instead of escape. You wake lighter, clearer, ready to act instead of dragging yesterday's weight into today. Reflection transforms rest into real preparation. The discipline of reflection doesn't require hours of journaling. It requires consistency. Even a few sentences written each night can reshape your trajectory. Over time, these records become a map of your growth. You can look back and see how far you've come, how challenges became victories, how weaknesses were turned into strengths. This perspective fuels persistence, reminding you that every small act of discipline is building something larger. Ask yourself, when was the last time you ended the day with reflection instead of distraction? How many lessons have you lost by refusing to pause? How many cycles have you repeated because you never examined why they began? If you do not reflect, you are not leading your life. You are simply enduring it. And endurance without direction is not discipline. It is slow defeat. The challenge is clear. Tonight, before you close your eyes, take 10 minutes. Ask yourself the 3 questions. Write the answers down. Notice what you did well, admit what you must change, and commit to one adjustment tomorrow. Protect this practice as if it were as essential as sleep itself, because it is. Without it, you dull your edge. With it, you grow sharper every day. Ending the day without reflection is one of the most silent but devastating habits, destroying your discipline and focus. Replace it with intentional reflection, and you turn every day into progress. Because discipline is not just about controlling what you do. It is about learning from what you did and using it to become stronger tomorrow. Discipline is rarely lost in a dramatic collapse. More often, it is stolen quietly, piece by piece, through the habits you repeat without noticing. You don't become undisciplined because of one failure. one missed opportunity, or one moment of weakness. You become undisciplined because mornings start in chaos, because your mind is filled with noise, because your body is neglected, because your goals are forgotten, because complaints replace gratitude, because your own words sabotage you, and because your nights end without reflection. None of these by themselves seems catastrophic, but together they form a pattern that drains your focus and convinces you that discipline is beyond your reach. But here is the truth you must carry. The same principle that destroys you can also rebuild you. Habits are neutral forces. They are neither good nor bad until you decide what direction they serve. If small destructive habits can slowly dismantle your discipline, then small intentional habits can just as surely restore it. Discipline has never been about giant leaps of willpower. It has always been about the quiet, consistent practices that shape who you are becoming. Think about what you have uncovered. You now know the hidden traps, the chaos of unplanned mornings, the junk that pollutes the mind, the neglect of the body, the silence of forgotten goals, the poison of constant complaint, the careless words spoken against yourself, the wasted endings of unreflected days. These are the silent enemies. But knowing them gives you power, because once exposed, they can no longer hide. You cannot claim ignorance anymore. You cannot drift unconsciously. From this point forward, every time you reach for your phone at dawn, every time you complain without thinking, every time you collapse into bed without reflection, you will know exactly what is happening. Discipline is being stolen, and knowledge creates responsibility. Yet there is hope in this responsibility. Because the moment you recognize a destructive habit, you also recognize the possibility of its opposite. Where there is chaos, you can create order. Where there is noise, you can choose wisdom. Where there is neglect, you can choose care. Where there is forgetfulness, you can choose remembrance. Where there is complaint, you can choose gratitude. Where there is sabotage, you can choose empowerment. Where there is avoidance, you can choose reflection. Each destructive habit has a mirror image waiting to be chosen. And those choices, repeated daily, rebuild not only discipline but identity. Stephen Covey often reminded us that we are not victims of our habits, but creators of them. Between what happens and how we respond lies the freedom to choose. Right now, that freedom is yours. You do not have to remain someone whose discipline collapses in silence. You can become someone whose discipline strengthens in silence, through the same ordinary moments that once destroyed you. So here is the challenge. Don't wait to fix everything at once. Pick one habit, just one, and replace it today. Tonight, before you go to bed, plan your next morning. Or tomorrow, instead of scrolling, feed your mind 10 pages of wisdom. Or catch a single complaint and turn it into gratitude. Small acts, repeated with consistency, are how you take back control. Begin with one, master it, and then move to the next. Over time, you will not just practice discipline, you will become disciplined. And remember this, identity is the strongest force in human behavior. If you keep telling yourself you are someone who struggles with discipline, you will live in agreement with that identity. But the moment you decide, I am someone who honors my word, who controls my mornings, who chooses gratitude, who reflects daily, your life begins to align with that decision. Because your actions will rise or fall to the level of who you believe you are. You are not a prisoner of these 7 habits. You are the architect of new ones. And the future will belong to the person who stops allowing destructive routines to dictate their days and begins shaping life with intention. That person can be you, if you choose. So let this be more than another video you watch and forget. Let it be a turning point. Take one step today. Speak one word of strength. Write one plan for tomorrow. Practice one moment of gratitude. Reflect on one lesson tonight. And then do it again and again and again. That is how discipline is built. Not in a single leap, but in the daily refusal to let destructive habits define you. If these words struck something inside you, subscribe now, as a reminder that you've drawn a line in the sand, and today is the day you chose not to go back. Don't stop here. The journey continues.